Welcome to Our Drummers Musicians, your backstage pass to Melbourne's vibrant music scene. Recorded on a cosy couch in Brunswick, join us as we explore what it truly means to be a musician, as we speak to the diverse talents that make music in our city. Today we're chatting with Australian jazz musician Lillian Albazi. Whilst completing her bachelor's degree at Monash University, majoring in jazz performance as a vocalist, Lillian was invited to perform with her jazz outfit at the Melbourne International Jazz Festival. Since then, she has established herself nationwide, performing at festivals, local jazz clubs, and headlining at the Melbourne Recital Centre. Lillian also leads the Melbourne alt-indie rock band Great Falls, which released their debut EP last year. Join us as we explore Lillian's dual involvement in Melbourne's jazz and indie band scenes, and delve into her recent collaborations with the similarly named, yet sonically distinct, US noise rock post-metal band Great Falls. We want to take a moment to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians on the land in which this podcast was recorded. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
You've just come back from the UK, is that right?
Correct. The cold, cold UK.
Yeah, what does it feel like the music scene in the UK is like now compared to Melbourne, which is, you know, the place where you're regularly making music?
Well, I was only there for 3 days. I did a whirlwind trip up, flew 2 days either side for 3 days of fun. So from what I could tell, it felt much like Melbourne, to be honest. It's really diverse. The subcultures and the different, groups of people that were coming to shows and I was meeting backstage were, and at the merch desk were much like the people in Melbourne. So I didn't really feel like I was anywhere else except home. But That might just be the fact that I was like on a plane and then at these shows and I was like, did I even do that? But yeah, it was really hip, really diverse, really cool, the shows we played and the people that I got to meet. Yeah, I would have liked to have seen a bit of jazz and some other shows while we were there, but it was really busy, so next time.
So what was the project you were doing in the UK?
So I was playing with my band Great Falls, not to be mistaken by my Melbourne indie rock project Great Falls, that is here based in Melbourne. I also have, another band that I collaborate and play with that are based in America, in Seattle, Tacoma. And they were doing a tour around Europe and they asked if I wanted to come up and do some shows with them. And I said yes. And I got on a plane to the UK and I played some shows, which was really fun.
Cool. I wanted to ask about it because, we were already sort of like talking in the little intro about how you're doing jazz and, band scene stuff.
Yeah.
But then this American band, Great Falls, is like a noise band, which is a totally different thing again.
Yeah.
What's it like being in that scene?
It's really interesting, actually, because I think that my background in jazz really informs what I do on stage and in the studio with those boys in America. So the story, if we're going to get into it, is that 3 or 4 years ago, I was trying to name my indie alternative band here in Melbourne, and I was trying to think of names. And as adults, well, me, especially as an adult, I overthink everything and try and think of things that are going to be really cool and really hip. It ends up being really contrived and try hard and just the worst names ever.
Yes.
And so I was at my girlfriend's house with her 2 kids and I was sitting there and I was like half a bottle of champagne down and I was just thinking of these terrible names like Stonehenge and like Rock Flower and God, they were awful. And Ruby's kids were like, no, Lil, you can't. No, that's terrible. Daisy was playing with Humpty Dumpty, this Humpty Dumpty toy. And Casper, the eldest, after like a couple of hours of the poor thing listening to me rattle off all these shocking band names, and I was even on bandgenerator.com.
Oh, yeah.
Was getting really desperate. Casper just quietly turns around and he goes, call your band Great Falls because Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. And I was like, who is this kid? Ruby, is that okay? Oh. Ruby said, yeah, go for it.
Wow.
So we named the band Great Falls. And we looked online and we were like, oh, there's another Great Falls and they're in the States. But, you know, they won't notice us. We're just like an indie startup.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be a thing. But we put a tilde in between Great and Falls just in case for legal purposes and out of respect, and also because the Spotify algorithm is just shocking and just, as we all know, dumps your band's music into the other band's page. Mm-hmm. And anyway, like maybe a month or two later, I get this DM in my Instagram page from Shane, who's the bassist of Great Falls in America.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh my God, this is my reckoning. This is it. And he said, he was so nice. And he was like, hey, I listened to your jazz record and, you know, the 7-inch that you guys just released. And I really loved it. We're about to record our next album in the studio here. I was wondering if you'd be interested in collaborating and doing some remote recordings on it and, you know, seeing where it takes us. And because I am me and I love opportunity and I say yes to everything and I get excited by everything in life. Like if you said to me, let's go to Castlemaine tomorrow, I'd be like, yes, let's go. I said yes. And yeah, I think Shane, Nick, Damien, myself, John Shawk, I think I'm saying that properly in my Aussie accent, and Scott Evans, the sound engineer who recorded it, just had absolutely no idea where it was going to take us 2 years later. So they cut the record with Scott and sent me the tracks, and I remotely recorded from my home studio in Coburg, and it just worked. Like I don't even know how to, it's just one of those things in life where it all just fit together so well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, to answer your question, the noise world is, you know, I'm still feel like I'm fairly new to it. I've kind of spent the last 2 years exploring it with the boys and, you know, obviously being overseas and dipping my toes in it. I think what I do works really well. I think having that improv background and having kind of a higher voice or a higher instrument cutting through the kind of really guttural and grindy and metallic and heavy sounds seems to work really well, and having that break and sort of breath of air in between the noisier passages just seem to really come together.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if it's a, you know, I don't want to say a blanket statement for all noise music, but definitely in the case of the music that Shane, Damien and Nick are making in Great Falls and myself coming into it, it works really well and it felt so good on stage. So yeah, I went to the UK, it's now 3 weeks ago. We were supporting Botch, who are this noise band for their final world tour.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the first show was in Bristol and I rocked up to soundcheck, and that was the first time I'd met them in real life. And we did soundcheck for like 10 minutes. Then we got on stage to like 2,000 people and did the show.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was really amazing. And it just felt easy, which is such a rare gift in music, I think, is when you find a project and people and like a subculture to immerse yourself in, which is easy. I think it's so inspiring. Like I've never felt more inspired and more driven as a creative than I do now.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So is your role one of doing parts or doing improvisations? How does it work? It's
kind of, at the moment it's both, because just basing it off how we did the last record. So the last record I really just recorded this plethora of different sounds and manipulations of my voice and whispers and drones and pads of harmony and things, and I sent them more than they needed.
Mm-hmm.
So then when they got into the studio with Scott, they just pulled things away, and I said to them, do whatever you want with the vocals on your end. So yeah, they pulled everything away and they manipulated it all and they added things in, and I'd come up with riffs and different little passages that were fixed sort of melodies that I could anchor myself in the songs.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a whole heap of improvisation within it. So, you know, taking that from a studio context and what the boys did with the record, of course, I've listened to it and I've listened to it so many times since then. So going into the live setting in the UK with them, I could anchor myself in that when Damien or Nick did different parts, like they've got little, you know, a guitar passage that I could be like, oh cool, that's what I'm doing my little vocal run over, and I've got to do that over that. But then there are some passages where it's just like, okay, I'm just going to improvise,
mm-hmm.
which is really exciting as a jazz musician, being in that world and also being able to be given the flexibility and the openness to improvise. And when I say improvise, like not scat, of course, improvise within the context of that music, which is just kind of creating sounds and having pedals and manipulating those sounds on stage in the moment, which I also think is really exciting for the audience too. And it's really exciting for us. Like, yeah, Shane and Nick, Damien and I, it was just the coolest thing. Like, it's so cool making music like that, and it's really exciting, and it's can be a little daunting, but I don't think so. I love that aspect of improv.
Mm-hmm.
Is getting on stage and just really having to listen and really having to reconnect with the music every night and not having one night be the same. You know, when we did the 3 shows, there were definitely themes that the audience could pick up on if you came to every show, but not everything that I was doing was exactly the same every night.
Mm-hmm.
So also is that element of surprise and fun, and I could talk about it for hours. I just find it so exciting, and it's a really cool spot to be in as a creative. I think if we keep collaborating on music and we keep making music, I would love to do, we've spoken about writing together and doing some things that are a bit more fixed, but I think we'll probably keep staying true to having that element of, you know, me sending lots of pads to them and lots of different things, and them doing what they want with it, and then us getting up on stage and doing kind of like a middle ground of that too. But yeah.
So have you always been into improvised music? Like, is that how you got started as a singer? Always doing like some version of, regardless of style, but like improvisation, or was it something else that like first got you in?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I listened to jazz, and I got into jazz later than a lot of our fellow musicians who we studied with at the con. My friend Tom Allen Graham, who's an amazing guitarist based in Naarm, when I was about 13 or 14, he came over. He's my older brother's best friend. Okay. So he's known me since I was like 6 years old. Mm-hmm. He came over for my birthday when I was about 13 or 14, and he gave me Ella Fitzgerald's Whisper Not on LP.
Wow.
And that was my introduction to jazz. And I just fell in love with it. Like, I've always known that I've wanted to be a vocalist and a singer to some degree. But before that moment in my life, I was listening to a lot of Paul Kelly and the local scene around that. I grew up in St Kilda, so I was really heavy on Nick Cave and Paul Kelly at the time, and, you know, the birthday party and everything, and having an older brother who was kind of immersed into that punk scene that was like so special at the time in St Kilda and Melbourne. I was really listening to all of that sort of music, PJ Harvey and Pixies. But then when Tom gave me that record, I was like, well, what is this? Like this harmony. And I just remember just being completely captivated by Ella's voice and what she was doing and how she was manipulating it, which I think is what hooked me into it. And so then as you do, you start exploring the, classic records, which are classics for a reason. Like everyone, I ask people what their favorite jazz record is, and a lot of people say, oh, it's just Kind of Blue, and like it's not a very good answer. You're supposed to give some really cool answer where you're supposed to say this really profound, like super indie, like acid jazz record that nobody knows. Like they're classics for a reason. Those 50s and 60s records, how they were recorded, how they were arranged, are so amazing. So I started, listening to all of those records, and then as you do, developing and your sound and your catalogue and your knowledge of jazz through high school and the channels that you do there, VCE music and everything. And then I got to the end of VCE and I was like, the only thing I'm good at is music, and the only thing I'm interested in is music, and I don't really want to do anything else. And I was lucky enough to have very supportive parents, who said to me, go for it. So tried out at Monash and got into Monash, and then you get exposed to a whole heap of music at university and studying music at a tertiary level, which you know about, and just being surrounded by different people and different tastes and different opinions. And so I never anticipated being a jazz musician, but Tom coming that day and giving me that record was the best gift I think anyone has given me. Because I don't think I'd be where I am today without jazz. Well, I definitely wouldn't be. And I wouldn't be the musician I am, because I think it really gives you such a great foundation, such a good ear. And it's just the coolest. It's just the coolest.
Well, I wanted to ask, like part of the podcast is sort of looking at what is a musician? Yeah. And you call yourself a jazz musician, even though you do like so many different things. And so I sort of wanted to ask about, why is it that you identify with that term rather than just calling yourself a musician or a vocalist or a professional musician? What is it about saying, jazz musician that is what resonates with you, I guess?
It's such an interesting question and conversation point to bring up, because I was just talking about this with my older brother last week, in the sense that I'm definitely a jazz musician and I identify as that, but now in my career I'm not sure if I'm into kind of thematic labels or genres anymore. I think as a 30-year-old woman who's been playing professionally for the last 7 years, definitely when I started out playing shows, I was just playing jazz, and that's awesome, and I still play jazz, and I'm still cutting jazz records, and I'm still playing with jazz musicians at jazz clubs, but I'm not making that music to be identified as a jazz musician. I'm making that music because it resonates with me and it keeps me passionate and keeps me creative, and I love doing it, just like I do both the Great Falls bands. So I was speaking to my older brother last week, and I was saying, I think now I just think I'm a musician. And I think I personally just want to make the music I make, and I don't want to put a label on it. Like my next record that I've written while I was out last year on tour, I'm going to record that soon. I didn't write it as a jazz record, you know what I mean? It just came out as it came out, and the chords came out as it came out, the harmony came out, the different rhythms in it, the different time signatures, modulations and everything. I didn't write it as a jazz record. I'm sure it will be marketed as a jazz record, but for now, at this point in my life and career, I'm just content making the art and creating the music as it comes out. And I'm not fussed what labels people want to put on it when it comes out into the world. And I think that's an exciting thing. Like, I create the music and I make the art, and I have my own personal opinions and connections to it and stories. But I think it's so important for me as an artist to just put it out in the world and see how people resonate with it and how people want to categorize it. I guess it doesn't bother me that much anymore. So it's an interesting question. I'm still not sure how to completely answer that, but yeah, I definitely still identify as a jazz musician, but I think now, as someone who's been in the industry for a long time, I make the music that I make that resonates with me, and everyone else can label and categorize me as they wish, because it doesn't bother me. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. While you're saying that, I was thinking that it's interesting that you use the language like that you play, and that you play a gig.
Yeah.
And it's not language that a vocalist generally would say.
Yeah.
Often it's like, oh, I sang at this.
Yeah.
But you use all of these phrases like an instrumentalist would say when you're like describing your performances.
Yeah.
Is that something, that you've like thought and deliberately included in your vocabulary, or something that has just come because you've gone through like a more traditional music school path, where that was happening because you were studying with other like instrumentalists, and in the jazz scene, vocal is just as much of an instrument, I suppose, as any of the other instruments that aren't your own voice.
Yeah, I've been really firm in my stance that I want to be recognized and counted as a musician. I personally get frustrated by people just categorizing vocalists as vocalists. I think we are equal musicians, and we are musicians. And I think I'm a musician. I play instruments just as well as anybody else, and I tour just as much as my male counterparts in my industry, and I read music just as well as them, and I am and it doesn't even matter if you can read music or not. That's not even a thing. But I just think that singing and being a vocalist, I think, should be categorized as being a musician. I understand it's the only instrument that's within your body, or the other instruments are external, but I think that makes it harder personally. If I'm if I'm sick, if I'm not feeling well, even little things like if you cry the night before, your voice is affected the next day. As a woman, when you're menstruating, it changes the timbre of your voice for the period that you're menstruating. All these things that, vocalists and, female vocalists have to adjust, adapt, and change. I think it's one of the hardest instruments to master, especially because, as well, you have to work on pitch and being on point. And so I really like to be marketed and spoken about as a musician. It's my preference. I'm sure there are probably people out there that would prefer vocalist and singer, and power to them, because each to their own. But yeah, for me, I think it's important for me to be recognized and seen as a musician, and I've worked for a really long time to get that. And I think I feel like just now it's all kind of, people are referring to me as a musician, which makes me really happy.
Well, it's great. And everything you say is true, and I agree with. Like, I had a podcast guest, Tim Mallis, come in, who he's like a pipe organ player and piano accompanist, and he teaches at the Australian Boys Choir. Yeah. So he's in like the choral world, and I can't remember if it was on the podcast or just afterwards we were chatting about how like our instruments are just like hitting things. Like, he just presses buttons and the noise comes out of the organ, and I just like hit a drum with a stick, and there's all these different levels of like complexity of all the different instruments, and so maybe there's like a pathway where some instruments are easier to like get started in than others, like, because on the piano you can press the button and it sounds like a nice note, but if you try and play the violin for the first time, it's probably going to screech.
Yeah.
And But then really it goes to, well, each instrument is just as hard as each instrument is.
Yeah.
Like they are all comparatively just as difficult at the mastery level.
Yeah.
Because they all are limited to certain things that they can do, and they have strengths, and you just have to bring your skills to try and be able to use the instrument in the best way, and the voice is no less a part of that. If anything, the distinction of it being something that is within you rather than externally just adds a whole layer of complexity. And interesting to hear you talk about, well, here's all the physiological things that are going on that affect it as well, and especially for women, that it's changing. Things that I've never had to think about as playing the drums.
Yeah. But I mean, as you said, every instrument has its complexities and its own things. And, I think if you're wanting to really master every instrument, it's just as hard as each other. Like, I suck at drums. I can give you a really sick 4/4 rock beat. All the Small Things by Blink-182. I can rock that. Killing in the Name of, but don't make me walk the dog because I can't swing at all.
So the new album that you're doing, is that going to be released under your name, Lillian Albazi?
Yeah, it's going to be released under my name. I think I've got a few records that are in the works at the moment, which makes for a very busy year, but I'm really excited. But this record is actually, I think, the one that's going to mean, they all mean so much to me, but this one just seems to be like a really personal. I didn't think I was able to write this record, basically. I didn't think I had it in me as an artist. I try so hard to develop and grow, and, I work on my craft every day, and I practice and I listen, and I have different musicians that are inspirations to me, and I think one day I'd like to, cut a record that's inspired by that and has that sound. But I wrote this record, and I didn't think I could, and that's really exciting. And without saying too much about it, it's going to be really, I don't think people will be expecting it. And I think that's really exciting to me. I love changing and growing and adapting and moving. And it's very much inspired by my musical idol since I was about 10 years old, Joanna Newsom. I don't know if you know her.
No.
She's a harpist and a pianist and a singer. I think she's Canadian. Apologies to the listeners if she's not Canadian. And she wrote a record called Ease, which is just the most amazing record I've ever heard in my life. Her songwriting, I'll link it to you later. It's just wonderful. And then she's written The Milk-Eyed Mender and Have One on Me. And just as I listened to that Ella Fitzgerald record for the first time, when I listened to Joanna Newsom's Ease, just like a whole world opened up to me. So I've always wanted to write a record that I could take inspiration from Ease and bring things into the record that I've written, but I never thought I'd actually be able to do it. So I've worked really hard. I've got a really rockin' vitamin D deficiency from just being inside in the studio.
Okay.
But that's okay. I can go to Queensland. It's winter in Melbourne. We can move up to Queensland for a couple of months and work on the suntan. But it's and also just all those really lush, records. Joni Mitchell's Both Sides Now. That's got all those beautiful string arrangements on it. Ella Fitzgerald with, I think, the London Symphony Orchestra. That's that record.
Oh, yes.
Just strings. I just find strings on jazz records so beautiful. I think some people think they're really daggy and lame and outdated, but I'm the opposite. I think all of those Frank Sinatra records with strings, and even like I remember watching Singing in the Rain as a child and listening to those strings on that record. It's just so beautiful. So I've tried to really incorporate all of these kind of orchestral sounds into the new record, which has been really exciting. And I think what's different from the last record to this record is I've really collaborated with a lot of people, and I've had lots of people read over the charts and the music, different instrumentalists, different genres of instrumentalists, you know, I'd send the charts to and then listen to their feedback and get people to play the charts and tell me what they think and tell me, you know, that chord shouldn't be a like E flat 6, it should be a, you know, this and a this, and you should change that. And so I've spent a lot of time writing the record, but also digesting the music and letting a lot of people digest the music and listening to their feedback in a really honest and open, safe space, and then taking that on. I think the older I get, the more open I am to people's constructive feedback on music. And yeah, I want it to be the best it can be. So it's passed through some hands and ears, which is also really cool. So I feel like it's in a good space and place to rehearse and record now.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
I would love to ask lots more questions, but I'll have to have you back once the albums come out. So
that sounds great.
I can find out what it means that you didn't think that you'd be able to make it.
Yeah, I think that's, Mum would say I'm doing a total injustice to myself as a musician, and I think I am, but I don't necessarily think that's such a bad thing. I think our industry can sometimes have a lot of ego, and I think it's good to surprise yourself from time to time and keep surprising yourself. I like it.
So how's it been, you know, because you've been doing your jazz vocal the jazz musician band leader performance where you play shows.
Yes.
But you've also started Great Falls about 4 years ago.
Yep.
So when you're doing the jazz musician thing, is it like one part of you and then there's a completely different part of you that comes to the Great Falls gigs? Or do you feel like you're, you know, doing the same thing, but just, you know, in two different stylistic areas? How much is it different for you when, you know, people would think of like the jazz band as quite like a distinct thing, and there's jazz clubs and then there's the local band scene, and they don't really like play in each other's venues very much. And I'm interested to know like what your process is when you're going through them, and if it's all just your music, or it's fun to like, you know, play different roles and have like a different mask on when you're doing, you know, the different styles and stuff.
Such a good question. I think, geographically, the scenes that I work within, they don't blend over to each other. But it's definitely just the same me at every show. And I say this all the time. Every gig informs the other gig. So there are parts of jazz that I've taken into negatives into positives, which is the 12-inch that we recorded with Great Falls. There's a song on there called Northside Dreaming, and we went into the studio, and Paul Mabry, who cut that record, I improvised the last section of that song, you know. So you listen to it and there's like this crazy like vocal modulation thing that happens, and that's completely improvised. But then I'll take parts of, you know, the indie rock idiom that I like and put that into my jazz standards. You know, I really like reworking jazz standards, and you know, because I think jazz is always changing and moving and adapting to the times that we're in. So I like to kind of bring it into now and add little themes and different things that perhaps are not deemed as traditional jazz, but I take inspiration from. So it all informs each other, and definitely there are no masks on. I don't have to put on a different mask for a different band. It's all me, and I'm the same person on stage. I don't change my personality or anything. I just perhaps don't bring my shout guitar to a jazz gig. But in saying that, I was chatting to a friend who I've got a jazz duo with, and I'm actually going to bring the shark guitar to a jazz gig, because
Cool.
I do what's natural to me. And I think that, for me personally as the artist, I don't see them as 3 different genres. I see them all as my music, all informing each other. And I don't think I'd be the musician I am today doing what I get to do without having all 3 inform each other. I think if you took one away, if you took my jazz away, I don't think I would have ended up in the UK with Shane, Nick and Damien, you know? And I think if you took Great Falls away, I wouldn't have some of the themes that I have in After Image and some of the live arrangements that I have of jazz standards that I do with the Jazz Boys and the jazz band. Yeah.
Can I ask, what is a shark guitar?
It's my favorite thing to talk about. I'll have to show you a picture afterwards, but I am a bit of a gear nerd, so I just like, not that anyone's ever wondered what I get up to, but I don't have a TV, so a lot of my friends ask me, what do you do at night? I literally just surf reverb.com and like chuck in so many notifications for equipment that I can't afford, and just will never pay the shipping costs to get like this amazing like vintage microphone shipped from Antarctica for like $2,000. But I still set up the notification because I want it. But yeah, so I was surfing eBay and there's this guitar that I saw years ago, and it's a shark guitar. It's shaped like a shark. The body is the shark's body, and then it's got the neck, and then the neck acts as the tail, and then the headstock is the actual tail with the fins, the end of the tail. I don't know. And I was like, oh my God, this is the guitar that I saw 5 years ago. It's a shark guitar. How amazing is this guitar? And all of my friends and my bandmates in Great Falls were like, absolutely do not buy that piece of trash. You will not be taken seriously. That is not, like, do not buy this. It's not worth your money. The guy was selling it for $600 US. The thing's worth about 100 Australian, if anything. That's probably a very generous calculation on my behalf. But
so it's not made by a reputable...
It's made by J. Terser. They're called J. Terser Shark Guitars. And so I went on eBay and I messaged this man and I said to him, hey, like, I really want to buy this guitar, but you're kind of taking the piss with 600 US. I'll be willing to give you 200 Australian, which is also, yes, very generous for all you guitar nerds out there listening. I did pay $200 for it. And he agreed. He said, oh, but I just, like, it is a, what did he say? It's a cult item. Oh. And I said, I know it's a cult item, but it's still a piece of crap. So I purchased this shark guitar, and, you know, I've had to have the nut replaced and I've had to have the bridge reworked because the tuning is just shocking. The tail, the headstock, the tail piece is like, the headstock is bigger than the body. Oh. So it's like falls down. So I've got to like hold it with my wrist and have a double strap on it and everything. But it's the best thing I've ever purchased in my whole life. Wow. Like, it is the world's most wonderful toy. And everyone loves it. Like, it's wild. I have people every day messaging me asking if it's for sale, how much I want for it. And I have people coming up at shows asking if they could play it. And wow. I'm convinced it's a child's guitar because my fingers don't fit in between the tuning pegs. And the body is so small. It's like, but I don't care because it just is the most horribly beautiful thing that it's the coolest thing in the world. Wow. And I feel really powerful playing it, which I think is so important. I've got amazing vintage, beautiful guitars that I also play and I record with, but I think it's important to have fun in music as well. And sometimes people can get so bogged down in being serious and being, I've got to be like, come across really serious and really cool and, present this music, And I just think it's fun to whip out a shark guitar every now and again and make people smile and just be joyous within the music that you're creating. The music that I play really serious love songs that are, that I wrote so honestly and earnestly, and I play them on the shark guitar, and it doesn't take away from that music that I created and the importance of that art and that art to me, and, the messages I'm trying to send across within the music that I make. But I think that you can do that with a shark guitar and still be taken seriously, and I think you should still be taken seriously as a musician, being able to do that. And people seem to take it really seriously, and I think that's fun, and I think it's important to not forget about fun and play within music. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
You'll have to send a picture. Because I can't even visualize a guitar body where the head is bigger than the guitar.
Yeah, the headstock. It doesn't look it in photographs, but yeah, I bought it not thinking that, but it's the first instrument I've played where the headstock is like way heavier than the body. But I've got to post pictures. I'm shocking with social media. I still haven't posted anything from the UK tour, so there'll be so many pictures coming out.
Cool. Yeah, it's so true though about the taking music super seriously versus being able to have fun. And it was making me think of, I can't remember which carols it was, but Tony Floyd played with the Black Sorrows at the Carols by Candlelight event. Yeah. And at the end of the song, Tony whipped out this huge pair of sleigh bells on like a big band and just stood up behind the drums and shook the sleigh bells for the Christmas event. And Tony's like a great embodiment of the let's have fun. Yeah.
I think we're all, we're in music to make the music that we want to make and to get the message across and to be, write very serious art music and jazz and all of that sort of stuff and pay tribute to those who came before us and lead the path for those who are, coming after us. But it doesn't mean we can't have fun and put smiles on people's faces and make people feel good. Like, I'm in music because it makes me feel good. And I just think, it's play and fun, and having a laugh is so important. It's so important in every aspect of music. Being on tour, it just,
It's awesome. I just noticed what the time was, and so I think it's the time of the show where we have to take you to the final segments.
Okay.
As much as I would love to keep chatting, you just have so many interesting takes on things, and
thanks.
It's really nice just to hear about what you've been up to.
We can do part 2.
That would be excellent.
Yeah.
So I've been playing this game where each guest gets to ask a question of the next guest. Okay. But they don't know who the next guest is.
Oh, okay.
So for you, I've got a question from the last guest. Okay. Megan Burslem. Yep. She's the host of Classic Breakfast on ABC. This is her question for you.
Okay.
My question is, can you name 10 female composers?
Yes. Like any genre?
Yeah.
Okay, because I was going to say, if you're going to ask me classical, you're putting me on the spot.
No. Well, it's Megan's question.
Okay, 10. Are you keeping count?
I'll keep count.
Okay, so Joanna Newsom, Sharon Van Etten, Carla Bley. I just heard James Sherlock do a really beautiful rendition of Lawns at Uptown Jazz Cafe.
Oh.
Yeah.
I just lived playing that last week. My brother-in-law is like an avid, extremely niche jazz record collector.
Yeah.
And he brought Carla Bley's album over, and Lawns is the final track on the B-side of that album. Oh, no, sorry, second last. 5th track before like an outrageous final number. But that's a great track.
Yeah. So you're going to get a real insight into my Spotify. Not that you're supposed to say Spotify because it's not a very good word at the moment. My record collection, what I'm listening to at the moment. Got to throw in my best friend Holly Moore, who's just an absolutely fabulous saxophonist on the scene. Sharon Van Etten. Who else am I really loving at the moment? Sally Greenaway. I was listening to on the plane. She's classical.
Mm-hmm.
Who else am I digging? Oh, Nicole Glover.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, just amazing. I met Nicole when she came down with Wynton Marsalis and the Jazz at the Lincoln Center Orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Nicole's new record is Nicole Glover Plays. I think it's just Plays is
Okay.
what, I might be wrong, but I think it is. But that came out and that's rockin'. Who else do I love? Angel Olsen. Just melt for Angel Olsen. I also love, I'm just trying to think of people I love as opposed to just naming randoms.
Sure.
Not that they're randoms, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, not just a list of names.
Not just a list of names, but people I actually, resonate with.
It's nice to have that extra layer from you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. I really like, Lucy Dacus, the whole Boy Genius crew.
Mm-hmm.
Last one, I've got to make it a good one. I'm going to go with Olivia and Pepita from OPEP, who are an amazing group from Nam in Melbourne.
Okay.
Their records have really inspired me growing up, so OPEP.
Cool. Oh, well, thank you.
That's okay.
What would you like to ask our next guest?
It's a really tough one. I'm like, do I go the silly or do I go the serious?
Or both.
Question for your next guest. What do you think is special about the Nam music scene, Melbourne music scene, that is unique to us and different from other parts of the world or Australia?
As in distinct from Australia or
Other
Australia?
parts of Australia, other scenes in Australia.
Oh, yeah, cool. Sorry for interrupting your question. at the
That's
end.
okay. You're welcome to interrupt.
No, can you say it again and then
Yeah.
I can...
What is special about the Melbourne music scene? What makes us unique? Do we have a distinct sound? And if you think we do, what is that sound? What do you think it sounds like?
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you.
It's okay. Thank you for having me. That was awesome.
Oh, I have like a final segment.
Oh, there's another segment.
Yeah.
Yay, it's not over. Yeah, go for it.
5 quick answer questions.
Uh-oh. I have foot and mouth syndrome, so this is going to be interesting.
What is your favorite venue? Feel free to interpret this however you want, actually, for these a couple of these questions, if you'd like to, with different bands, answer.
Mm-hmm.
But what's your favorite venue to play in Melbourne?
Okay, so with jazz, I'd have to say the Jazz Lab. I absolutely love that venue. I do spend most of my time there when I'm not playing shows. So for Jazz Lab. For Great Falls, I really love the Retreat is so fun to play on Sydney Road. We just played there, but also I'm really looking forward to being back at the Tote Hotel.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really happy that's Shane and Leanne, everything they've done with that, with the campaign to save it. So, looking forward to being back at the Tote. And, the Retreat we played on Saturday, which was really fun. I love that place.
Cool.
Yeah.
What about your dream venue to play at?
Oh, are we talking Australia? Or are we talking... dream venue. I would love to play at, one of the amazing jazz clubs around the world, you name it, Jazz Cafe, Blue Note, all of those places. Forum would be wonderful in Melbourne. Melbourne Recital Centre would be really beautiful in the main, I think it's the Elizabeth Murdoch Hall.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't really concentrate on dream venues. I don't think about that. I like to stay in the current moment, and I think I get ahead of myself too much if I think about that. So Even though they're venues I'd love to play at, I'm just really happy where I am.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's
and
great.
Hopefully I'll get there, but yeah, it's not something I put a lot of thought into, so I'm not sure I'm articulating the best answer here, but yeah.
What is your coffee order?
I don't drink coffee, so I haven't had coffee or caffeine for like 12 years. So my coffee order, and everyone's gonna like grind their teeth and grimace right now. I drink soy chais.
Oh.
So I've been, caffeine free for 12 years. I won't even have a tiramisu.
Okay.
I just find I'm really excitable. I'm like a puppy. I have so much energy. And then that energy on top of adrenaline that I get from shows, I can go for like 4 days on 1 hour sleep.
Wow.
So if you add coffee into that, I'm kind of turned into like the most chaotic little demon pixie you've ever seen in your life. So the world can do without a caffeined up Lil.
Well, what about where's your favourite place to get food after a gig?
Oh, I love a pub meal. Like I'm just a simple.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice going to fancy restaurants and things, but I'm more of a pub girl these days. Like I just like a good hearty feed.
Mm-hmm.
So anywhere on Sydney Road, anywhere on Brunswick Street, and then also Mexican food. If you put me on an island and you said you can only eat one type of food for the rest of your life,
mm-hmm.
it would 100% be Mexican food. Like anything. I could go for days on just guacamole and corn chips. So just simple things. I'm like a very simple gal. Yeah.
All right. And finally, what is one piece of advice that you'd give to your younger self?
Don't be so caught up in what other people think about your music and who you are as a musician. I think when I was younger, it's a double-edged sword because I think going through university was the best thing that ever happened to me because you're immersed in so many opinions and you're getting so many opinions around your music and what people think you can do to become a better musician, which is all so valid and so important, I think, when you're growing and trying to discover what your sound is. But I think that it's also really important to not put all your eggs in that basket of other people's opinions and what other people, think you should do. I think you should definitely take on the constructive feedback and work on it. But I think it's important to stay true to you and what resonates with you. And I think I spent a few years there in my career when I was getting started, just putting too much weight into what I thought other people wanted me to be. And so I tried to be that and really concentrated too much on that as opposed to just staying true to me and what feels right for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think just, taking on board opinions when you're starting out and trying to find your voice, but also just staying really true to yourself. I think now I'm older. As I said before, I'm not so bothered about opinions and labels and what people want to categorize me as. I'm just more interested in creating art that resonates with me. So I think probably just letting myself know that that's the vibe.
So where can people find your music, and if they want to buy it or come see a show or book you for any gigs or additional collaborations, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you or find the music?
So I've got a website which will let you know about my Great Falls and my jazz stuff here in Melbourne. I've got a Bandcamp for both projects. So the jazz stuff is under Lillian Albazi,
mm-hmm. and
Great Falls is under Great Falls. And we've got records and we've got lots of gig dates and things all happening. And then Great Falls, the American-based noise band, they've got their own pages. I don't think they've got a website, but they've got Bandcamp and social media. I'm a bit allergic to Facebook, so I do have a lot of people saying they've sent me messages on Facebook. I don't use it at all, so Instagram is kind of the way
mm-hmm.
forward. If people want to reach out for messages or emails. Otherwise, yeah, we've got lots of records out there if they wanted to buy something. But
Cool.
come say hi and check out my shark guitar.
Yeah. And do you have any of that cool merch left over too from the last Lillian Albazi, album?
Yeah, so it's down to like the last. I think I've got 2 tea towels left, like 2 long sleeve tops. I've got like 1 box of records.
Okay.
Which I'm like overly sentimental about, but I really want to sell. But then I'm also like, oh my God. So we're down to the bare bones, which is exciting because it just means that you clear out some space for the new project. So yeah, if people would like them, let me know.
Cool. Well, thanks very much for coming on the show and being so generous with your time. It's been really great.
It's been awesome. I can't wait for part 2.
Thanks for joining us on Our Drummers Musicians. I hope you enjoyed getting to know another Melbourne muso like I did. Help us grow by leaving a review, share the podcast with friends and family, and subscribe on our website for extra info. Got a guest you'd love to hear on the show? Please let us know at ourdrummersmusicians.com. See you next time.